All right, folks, let's hop into this. Hope you all are having a great Wednesday night. Time for a little bit of, we're going to play some games. We're going to play Oblivion, and actually, Oblivion will tie in a little bit to what I want to say for the talky bits portion of this stream, which is really about the feat of iron and clay and our current society, specifically the United States, but really you can make a point towards the entire West here with what I'm going to talk about. And the reason it ties into Oblivion is because Oblivion and the Elder Scrolls series in general is one in which the world is, at least the world in which you can travel, is dominated by an empire. And that dominance by an empire is important for the setting and the lore and how it all goes together. Oblivion in particular is a really good example because it's the center of the empire. It's the Cyrodiil. It's the main province that the empire rules out of the White Gold Tower. And in that province are all of the races that you're used to in the entire Tamriel world. You have dark elves and wood elves. You have Bretons and people up from Skyrim, the Nords, and then you have the Beastmen. You have Argonians and Khajiit, and indeed you have Imperials as well. Different kinds of elves like high elves and dark elves kind of fill everything out. And each of them has a different unique culture, a different set of cultural practices, a different set of common traditions, and indeed they often worship different gods, especially the dark elves. Well, I think one of the reasons Morrowind is such a popular game is that Morrowind takes place in a very alien world to us. When we're going to the island of Vardenfell, or you're just going to the province of Morrowind in general, you are stepping out of your world and into one that is very alien. And I think that's part of its charm. It really doesn't feel like some kind of version of, say, medieval England, which is probably closer to what Oblivion really ends up doing. It ends up kind of feeling like a medieval fantasy, but I think there's more to it. If you look at Oblivion, each little corner of the map represents a different piece of the empire. So you go up to Bruma, and it's Nords. It's basically a little piece of Skyrim. It's snowy, mountainous, and the designers kind of did this on purpose. You go over to Anvil, and it's a little bit like, say, Hammerfell. It's a little drier. You have more people from that area. You go down south towards some of the cities on the southernmost cities on the map. Trying to remember which one I'm thinking. I'm thinking of Leeuwin, I think. You have a meeting of two cultures. You have the Khajiit from elsewhere, and you have the Argonians from Blackmarsh. And they don't get along. And in fact, if you go down to the town, they will tell jokes to each other about how much they hate the other race and how much they despise them and hate having to deal with them. So the Khajiit are always, and it's funny because you have the same two voice actors doing both races. So you have one guy doing both the Khajiit voices and the Argonian voices. And it's like, why are Khajiit always licking their butts? Or why do Khajiits have bad breath? Because they're always licking their butts, and it's like the Argonians swim in the water, which is like really, really gross to the Khajiit, the fact that the Argonians happen to swim in the river. Is kind of funny. And so you have that not just with architecture, but with these kind of conflicting cultures. And I don't think that they intentionally try to set it up this way. I think really they were kind of modeling it off the Roman Empire. And this is really the way the Roman Empire governed its various parts for more than a millennium, is it, rather than having a direct control the way that we're used to in the United States, where Washington, we really feel like, has direct control over us. Rather, it was local government which had the control, and they had to pay tribute to Rome. So you had maintenance of local cultures. You didn't have those local cultures replaced with Roman culture. Rather, you had Roman culture kind of colonize those other cultures, but you still had regional differences between them. And indeed, you had the exporting of the Greek culture, the Hellenistic culture, back to Rome. And there were even some cultural tensions over that. They brought back lots of Greek slaves as artisans in the 2nd and 3rd century BC. Even up to the 1st century BC. And those slaves brought with them their culture, and so the Roman landscape became kind of Hellenized, which is interesting to think about. But in general, the Gauls had their culture, and Romans had their culture too. The Celts up in Britain had their culture, and Romans were there as well. So it was kind of like Morrowind, I think, is a great example. You have this omnipresence of like the imperial cult and things, but it's still essentially the dark elf, the place where the dark elves live. And the reason that this has things to do with our current society is our current society is an amalgam of people from different places, and nowhere is this more apparent than if you go to a city. So if you go to a modern city, this is what you'll experience. And having lived in really big cities before, I can say that this has been my experience, and it has been the experience of virtually every person I've ever met that has lived in a big city or continues to live in a big city even. And that is that everybody's from somewhere else and nobody knows each other. That is the big point here. Once you get out of the cities and you start to get out in the country, this starts to dissipate a little, but it's not, it's not totally gone. And I'm not just talking about immigrants from outside the U.S. or if you're in Europe, from outside of Europe. I mean immigrants from within your country and within your geographic region. So, when I was in Las Vegas, nobody was from Las Vegas. Everybody was from somewhere else. So people were from, I met people that were from New York that lived there. I met people that were from Hawaii that lived there. I met people that were from Florida, from Texas, Arizona, California, from Oregon, Idaho, every part, from Canada, Mexico, every country you could imagine. I met people that lived in Las Vegas who were from somewhere else. I never met a person who was born in Las Vegas other than children. Like, I did like private guitar lessons, so I had kids, and a lot of the kids were born in Las Vegas, but that was it. Like, none of the adults were from Las Vegas. And you probably couldn't rely on the kids to even stay in Las Vegas because of the way our culture has been set up. And the way our culture has been set up, it has been set up to emphasize the complete mobility of labor to the exclusion pretty much of everything else. So what I mean by that is that everybody can move around to where the job is. And not only is that acceptable, but that's preferred and expected. So if you're a person who grows up, say, in, a small town in Idaho, and you're really smart, you're doing really well in school, everybody knows that you're going to go places. That Billy, we know that he's going to go places. He's really smart. And so you get into MIT and you decide you're going to be an aeronautical engineer. That's what you want to do. Everyone's saying you're a genius level mathematician. You should be an engineer. So that's what you do. You follow that advice. So you move away when you're 18. You go to MIT and you study at MIT for a while, and you get your degree. And then where do you go? You have to go to where the jobs are. So you move down to LA. You get a job with Boeing, and you're really excited about that job with Boeing. And so you go to LA, which again is not where you're from. So you go to a place that you're not from to go to MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, I think is what that stands for. And then you go to LA and you get a job with Boeing. They're down in El Segundo, a town I used to actually live in. And it's a nice little town. It's as close to a community like Mayberry as you're going to get in LA. And even then, lots of people were from somewhere else. So I've been to the communities that are probably the most tight-knit, and I've lived in them compared to where else you go in the city. But you can't really afford to live there because it's really expensive. So you get an apartment somewhere else like Norwalk and drive into El Segundo in the morning to work at Boeing. Not only that, but you're not really designing spaceships and aircraft right away. You're doing quality control stuff is where a lot of engineers end up having to start off. And so you end up in this place where you're living in an apartment, you're renting the apartment temporarily till you can make enough money to maybe move into a better town. And you don't know your neighbors. Your neighbors maybe keep you up all night yelling at each other. They're having a bad breakup. Maybe you have to live next to Section 8 housing, and you got to deal with all the kind of people that go along with Section 8 housing. You can't park your car on the street. There's never a place to park your car. You come home from work hoping there'll be a spot. You have to park 2 blocks away from your apartment and walk up to it. It's a very common experience in LA. Walk back to your apartment. you got to pay 3 times as much for groceries, and you keep wondering, that $55,000 a year salary seemed really good when you moved to LA, because in Idaho that 55 grand would have gone really far, but in LA you're not making any money. In fact, you're losing money just to be in LA, but you don't have any other option because there's no other jobs. It's kind of where you got to stay. Got to work your way up to that $100,000 plus job so you can take out enough debt to buy a townhouse in El Segundo or Manhattan Beach or somewhere nice to raise your kids. You can't raise your kids in Norwalk because it's way too crappy a town, but you live there and you do it. You don't know your neighbors. You only maybe have waved at them a couple of times. The police maybe come by your apartment and they knock on your door and you're like, do you know anything about your neighbors? And you're like, I've never talked to them. The policeman isn't surprised because nobody ever talks to anybody. You've never talked to them. You don't know anything about them. Turns out that, one of them was beat up the other one or something, and you have to fill out a little bit of a questionnaire because you happen to live, did you hear anything on this night? What's going on? And you feel a little bit less safe in your apartment because it turns out your neighbors were like criminals. And this kind of stuff will go on and on. Even when you live in a fairly nice apartment, you have people smoking pot all times of the day or night, like stinking up your place. And you go over there to talk to them, but they don't answer the door maybe. Or maybe you have people that are just stomping around upstairs. You go up there to talk to them, and you end up in a fight. These kinds of things happen in LA because nobody has any connection to anybody else. Everybody's from somewhere else. There is no common ground, no common experiences, and no common values whatsoever. So anyway, you make a life for yourself there. You work your way up the salary schedule a little bit. You move out of that apartment having never met or talked to anybody in the building, and you move into a nicer place, a little bit closer to the Boeing building where maybe you're working. And then it's like, I've been so lonely here. I've been working nonstop. I'm working 60 hours a week to try to keep my head above water. I'm doing side gigs like programming websites because I can't afford, I don't want to live in that crappy apartment, but I can't afford to live somewhere nice. Rent's $2,800 a month, maybe $3,500 a month if I want to live in a 2-bedroom apartment. So you keep working. Maybe you decide to date some girls. And how do you meet women? Well, I don't know anyone in LA. You don't know anyone in LA, so you don't know how to meet women. So you get like Tinder, or you get a dating app, and you start flipping through the pictures and trying to talk to different girls. And they're not like the girls in Idaho. They don't talk like them. They block you all the time. You don't know what's going on. And you don't quite know how to communicate with them, but maybe you get a date, and you get a date with a girl, and you go on that first date, and it turns out she's Jewish. And of course you were raised as a Mormon, let's say. And so you're Mormon and she's Jewish, and you're like, well, I don't, maybe they're kind of close. We both have some books of the Bible in common, I guess. And so we'll date, and you try to have a relationship there, but you break up because she's upset that you said something political that was maybe too right-leaning in LA, and so she breaks up with you, and you don't know what happened there. You date another girl who's an atheist, and she just makes fun of you being a Mormon all the time. So that doesn't really go anywhere, and finally you end up dating another girl, and she's a Protestant Christian, and you're like, well, I guess is pretty close. I can't seem to find any Mormon girls here. And so you date her, and you decide to get married, and your parents come down and they are approving of the wedding. You get married, you move into a nice apartment. You're still kind of making headway at Boeing. Your salary's getting better. You haven't met any of your neighbors where you live, except for like one guy. There's one kind of hippie guy who will talk to you downstairs, and most other people just kind of wave and never really even bother to have a conversation with you. And then you end up in a divorce because you catch your wife cheating on you. You're like, how did this happen? I thought we had common values. And it turns out, you didn't have the common values, and you got to deal with the divorce now. And so now you're just one of the many divorced people in LA trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life. And you still can't seem to find anybody that has any kind of common experiences. You can't even find somebody who was on the high school football team. That's what it's like. Look, I was on the high school football team. I haven't seen anybody else that's been on the high school football team. And so you get more and more depressed and more lonely, and you wonder more and more what the hell you're doing with your life. You're still going home to your parents for Christmas. They still love you. You still talk to them all the time, but you don't really know what is the point of your life, where you're going. You start to lose your faith because there is a temple in LA, but you gotta drive kind of far to get to it, and you just end up stop going to church, and you just kind of fall away from it. And then you meet another girl, you go on a date. It's like she says she's Jewish, and you're like, well, I used to be Mormon, and that's where you're at, and that's your arrival point. Is like, we're different faiths, both of us not really practicing maybe, and we'll just live that way because that's the most common ground we can find. That's really common experience in cities. Nobody around you is like you. And one of the things that creates bonds between people is shared experiences. And this is something that can only really happen if you're both experiencing the same thing at the same time. What's the shared experience of being American? I can't think of very many other than like 9/11 and maybe watching the Super Bowl or something. There's very few shared experiences. But think about all the people maybe you went to high school with. And if we continue that little story forward, maybe Billy, if you're Billy, Billy, or you have Facebook, you keep up with your high school friends. They're all getting married. They're settling down. They're having kids. It seems like they're having a really happy life, but they were all so much stupider than you. They didn't do well in math. They just grew up and inherited their dad's car dealership, and you see them in a gigantic house, and you're scraping by in a little one-bedroom apartment, having to pay your ex-wife alimony, living in LA because everyone told you needed to be an aeronautical engineer. This is the society we live in, and it's all built on this labor mobility, the idea that you have to leave where you are and go to where a job is. And the more specialized and exceptional the job, and in a lot of cases the higher paying the job, the more you're expected to just travel, and your parents tend to approve of this. You go off to college, and then you find a job somewhere else in your super special intellectual field, whatever it might be, whether it's chemical engineering or something like that. I remember when my dad, before he died, he worked for a mining concern, and they had a lot of trouble finding chemical engineers because none of them wanted to move out into the sticks where the mine was. And it's like, that's what had to happen. There were no local kids who were chemical engineers. It's a really rare specialty when you live out in the Mojave Desert. There's no kids from Bakersfield or Barstow that know how to do this, so we got to find somebody, So when you have a high degree of labor mobility, and of course what goes along with that is extreme specialization in labor. The entire economy in our society is built around that labor mobility. The idea that, we need aeronautical engineers, so they have to be willing to move from wherever they're at to LA to work for Boeing. That's the way the economy has to work. But what is the result of that? The result of that is that it destroys community, and it destroys community because it destroys all capacity for common experiences. And I've experienced this myself. There was 10 years in my life where I moved every single year for 10 years. It was impossible to put down roots like that, but I had to because just life was constantly in flux as a young person. You just had no ability to take on the debt and put down the roots necessary to live like your parents did 30 years before. I think it's something that really hits Generation X on, is this idea that you never have lived in one place long enough to really say it's your home. If you ask me, where are you from? My answer is lots of different places. I was born in Texas. I've lived in Washington. I've lived in all over California. I've lived in Nevada. And what place is home among those? I'm like, I guess here is home because this is where my family is, and it's where my wife's family is. And we moved to where I'm at in order to have my kids have a community of family. It's my wife's family. My parents' family, it's all over the place. There's no way to have that with my mom or my dad's family because they are mobile labor, and they've just moved around. Some are in Houston, some are in, Dallas, Tyler, Corpus Christi, San Diego, Colorado, Wyoming, Florida, all over the world, or all over the country. Nowhere near each other. That's not a community. You can't have those common bonds of blood, and then you don't have the common experiences. And so it's impossible to have a community or a tribe or a tight group of people that you really care about the outcomes of the people around you, because you don't have anything in common with them. You don't have a religion in common with them, probably. You don't have common experiences, no ethnicity in common, no values maybe. Everybody just kind of clusters into the city because that's where the jobs are. And that's what we got. And what really reveals this to me and really hammers it home is this entire pandemic, because we have people having completely different responses to what's going on in a way that really indicates we don't have a common culture at all. If you look at a high trust culture like Japan, and they all put on masks and all did like the social distancing thing, and there wasn't really any social conflict about it, and then the whole thing was over. Here it's like people distrust the government, not incorrectly, right? We distrust the government saying to put on masks. Other people did it voluntarily way before the government said to do it. Other people are like, I refuse to do it. There's just no common ground. Nobody can get together and act like a community, act like a tribe. We're the feet of iron and clay. We don't mix together. There's no mixture here. It's not a melting pot. It is like it's like taking a bunch of Play-Doh and mashing it together and saying, look, we've made a new color of Play-Doh. It's like, we haven't. We've just mashed other colors of Play-Doh together, and so it just looks like an amalgam of nothing. It looks like confetti. It doesn't look like one thing. It didn't become gray mush. It became confetti. And that's really the point I want to get at here. So this one really made the COVID epidemic really made a big point in that direction towards me, which is that just people don't have common experiences. They have no trust with each other. And therefore, of course, they don't have trust with the government. The government is not the same as us. There's this feeling like that the people in the government in no way represent me. The government doesn't represent me. It oppresses me because the people in the government are not my people. Well, if you get to a really local level where everybody is a community, like an ancient village, the village council is made up of people from the village. They are us. It's not that there's no conflict, but there's much less conflict. There's much less need for any kind of government force to push things, because the people have the same values as the people that they're ruling over. And that's really what we've got here. We've got differences in values and mistrust the people that are over us, not unrightly, because they do have different values from us. They do think of things different. They have different goals for what government ought to do than the people who are paying their salaries. It's a big problem. So anyway, that's my little speech here. And I like looking at Oblivion like that because it actually really reflects that. You go into like the white gold tower area, and there's a bunch of different races, and they kind of get along, but not that well. And if you go to Morrowind, they just hate you because you're not from Morrowind. That's just how it is. That's kind of realistic. It's like you go to that thing, they call you Outlander. You're a freaking foreigner. You're Gaijin. You're not from here. We don't. This bar is only for Morrowinders. This is only for Dark Elves. It's only for Dunmer. You need to get out of here, Breton. Or if you're Dunmer that's not from here. You're still an Outlander. And so that's one of the things that I think Morrowind really nailed. And I don't know how intentional they were, or they were just iterating what's true. I think they were just iterating things that are true. Didn't have any kind of political bias to it. But that's really what it's like in an empire. Anyway, so let's take a look at the chat before we hop in and play some video games and have some fun. Let's see here. Orcs. I forgot orcs. Yeah. The good old, what are they? The Orsimer. The ugly ones. Elder Scrolls series dropping spears and polearms from the Lauren games. A really lazy move. How can you have a medieval fantasy setting without the main weapons? Yeah. The main weapons of war are spears and arrows, of course. Because you want to be able to offend your opponent at maximum range. The further away your opponent can be when you offend him, the safer you are from him. So spears are really, 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 really good. And you carry your sword with you not because that's like, I know swords are kind of this warrior symbol, and it occurs in lots of cultures, not just European and Asian cultures where there's this kind of obsession with swords with both of them. In Japan, we have this thing like the katana. The katana is like the symbol of the warrior spirit. It's like, that's not what samurais even used in battle. That was their sidearm. That was like, oh, I've lost my spear and my bow. I need to draw my sword. It was like the third weapon that you would use. And that was really true of like a medieval knight as well. You used a lance, a spear, a spear specialized for mounted attack. And if that broke, or you had to drop it, because if you gave point to someone and impaled somebody, it was hard to get your lance out without like breaking your arm. So you might have to abandon your lance, and then you drew your sword. And if you lost your sword, then you drew like your warhammer or your mace. You know, you had a long list of things that you would use. And in fact, if you were fighting with another, let's say you're grappling with another person in munitions armor, or another knight, somebody who's wearing armor, a sword is not a great weapon for that. You have to half sword and do lots of things to try to get into the nook. So what ended up being is like your sword was kind of for bashing someone about the head until you could get close enough and impale them with your rondel dagger, you know, just like punch through some part of their armor and get them good with a dagger, because a dagger ended up being a really good weapon for getting through armor. Kind of interesting to look at all that. So yeah, spears. Spears are the most important weapon, you know. Even the bow and arrow wouldn't exist without the concept of the spear. True. The spears are awesome in Morrowind too. You can really, you really actually have distance. And this is another thing about game implementation of spears. So if you have a real spear, and if you've never used a real spear, like a pike, if you say like a late medieval pike or Renaissance pike, which is just a really long spear. And rather than having a spearhead, you had a really defined shaft. You could you'd usually use that with munitions armor, which means you didn't have to carry a shield, and you could really get people far away. And so these formations of pikemen would really come in and could really jab at each other, and you could really hold a lot of ground, because it'd be very difficult to get through a field of pikes, cavalry or anything else to try to take a pike formation. They were really effective all the way, not just until firearms, but into the era of firearms and beyond. Born in Vegas, still live here now. It's like the only person. I didn't meet like any adults that were born in Vegas. Everybody was from somewhere else. They moved there. And that the number of women I met who moved there to be like nurses or teachers and were strippers at night, it's like, I don't know how I met all these women that were like this, but it was just a really common thing. It's like, yeah, I'm an exotic dancer, but I'm getting my teaching credential. I'm like, better not let that out too far. I was born and raised in a big city. I still live in one now, in which you said it's true. A lot of people aren't from here, and many people don't know each other. LA is particularly bad. Now, I lived in El Segundo, where everybody was actually from El Segundo. But even then, you know, if you're living in an apartment, most of your neighbors aren't from there. They're just living in that town for a while. It's not till you like spend $1.5 million to buy a house that you can get out of that. Do you ever think that the suburbs are just as bad as living in a city, or do you have to go rural to live around normal people? I don't think the suburbs are as bad as a city. I think the closer proximity you get to people, the worse it is. And also you have to think about, people don't make connections because they're never there permanently. You know, when you're in an apartment complex, nobody lives there for long. It's a way station. You know, you live in the apartment complex for a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, and with some other objective in mind, like, I'm going to buy a house, or I'm going to live somewhere else. Once you get into an actual neighborhood where you're buying houses, people tend to be in it a lot more for the long haul. But even then, there's people who buy and sell and rent houses all the time. So it's not 100%. It's not really till you get out to like rural towns. I live in a pretty rural town, even though we're closer to bigger cities, or to a bigger city, not a big city at all. But we're close to a city, not that far. I can drive into the city if I want something special, but otherwise I can be out in the country. People tend to be in it for a lot more for the long haul. They own farms. Their dad owned the farm. They're keeping the farm. You know, there's an olive oil place around the corner. They make olive oil. Their dad made olive oil. Their grandpa made olive oil. Their great-grandpa made olive oil in Greece. You know, that's where we're at. The great-grandpa decided to move from Greece to California to grow olives, and then they stayed here forever, right? That's pretty permanent. And I think that there's a benefit to that. Like, how many aeronautical engineers are there in an Amish community? How many people could be aeronautical engineers, or how many kids just don't even consider it because they're thinking first of the community? Aeronautical engineer is just not really anything that you would think of as an Amish person. You don't live with electricity even. So it's just, there might be lots of people who would be capable of doing that high thought level job, but you just won't see them because they don't leave the community. You have to allow that labor mobility to have those super specialist, high demand jobs. I think what'll be interesting, though, is if you can start separating location and job with some of those jobs, like aeronautical engineer. If it's like, hey, I can do my job in whatever program, like SolidWorks, I don't know what they use, right? I can do my job remotely using design software. That's great. Then you can still live in Idaho, or you can live in your Mormon community in Utah. Isn't sharing a profession with your coworkers a shared experience? It is, but most people don't stay at a job very long. Most people stay in a job 2-3 years and then move on. And because everybody does that, you have to think it has like a multiplicative effect. If everybody works at a job 2 years, the maximum amount of time you're probably going to spend with anyone is 2 years, and it'll be like one person. Everybody else there'll be some turnover. And so I've worked a bunch of jobs with different amounts of turnover, and it was like at the end of 4 years at a job, there was one person who had been there when you started, and everybody else had changed. Every single other face changed multiple times. So you know people in like these 6-month sprints in most jobs. You don't know them for a long time. It's only once you get out of some of this kind of mixing up industry kind of thing that you are able to stick in jobs for longer periods of time. Like we live in a gig economy now, so it's even worse if you're a millennial or you're a Gen Y person. You have to change jobs every 6 months. If all communities and local governments were like the Shire, America would be the greatest country on earth. That's how they were like, and it was the greatest country on earth. But as you start to allow high labor mobility and all the communities mix up with each other, it no longer becomes a federation of people that have some common value, some common need for common defense, and becomes just a mashed up thing of Play-Doh where really people don't have a lot of common. Like why would you go off and fight in a war to protect people you don't even know, like you don't know anyone around you, right? So do you feel a special need to go engage in warfare for their benefit? It's like Mrs. McCready down the hall, nobody even knows her. Nobody knew that she died. And she stunk up the whole apartment, and we had to call the police, and they found her rotten corpse because nobody bothered to check on her for 3 weeks. This is the society we live in now. Are you going to want to do those things which are for the common good? The answer is probably not. Whereas even if you are, let's say you're from your Mormon community, and I don't know why I picked Mormon, because it's it's a very tight-knit social community usually, and it's a religion that's markedly different from what you're going to experience in big cities. I don't know that's probably why I picked it. But, if you live in your, traditional Mormon community in Utah or Idaho or somewhere in the Midwest, a little further in the Midwest, like, I think there's more communities once you get out towards like Ohio and stuff. But anyway, let's say you live in your community there, and you care about everybody there. So if there's a war, there's something threatening the whole of the United States, well, you feel like you're doing something for the people you actually know versus for some amalgam of people that you don't know and who probably hate you, right? There's plenty of people who hate Mormons, but if you care about your community, then you'll probably do what needs to be done for your community at least, even if someone in New York like detests you for being a Mormon. That's how it is. So once you divorce those things, once you get everybody kind of mixed up and jumbled up, then there's no community. What do we do? Sorry, let me get to some more chat and then we'll play some games. The samurai would always use the glaive and the nodochi. Yeah, use spears, the Ari, before they went to their katana. Absolutely, I agree. Adventure Conquer King TTRP makes spears great, possibly even OP. All right, Adventure. I love tabletop role-playing games, and they've been on my mind recently with just design elements for them. I looked through all of my old 4th edition D&D books, and it's actually, I think, a pretty good game. Everyone hated it. I don't say everyone hated it, but lots of people hated it at the time because it was pretty different, and they called it like a WoW simulator, which is not really true, but I can understand the comparison because it really draws from wargaming, like tactical games that really they predate World of Warcraft by many, many years. But you're doing, you're a fighter that has special abilities and stuff like that. It kind of feels like WoW. It was really a tactics game, not a bad one, but they should have just sold it as Dungeons and Dragons Tactics, not Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition. Like, this is the next good edition for you to play, and everyone bought it and were like, dude, I spent the whole night on like 2 encounters with kobolds. Like, that's what we were doing, It's like, now we had fun playing, and I took stock of this. I'm like, well, we had fun. The combat was actually really fun, and it was very tactical, and it was very engaging. However, we didn't receive what we usually receive from a Dungeons and Dragons session, which is like gold. Like, is reaching some kind of point of forward momentum. It's like we walked into a dungeon and had 2 fights, and then we had to call it a night. And we did that for weeks until we like cleared out the dungeon, and we'd all gotten like 4 levels or something at that time. It just felt really slow, but if it had just been sold as a war game, as a tactics game, I think it would have done a lot better. The focus was for sure on the combat, on the micro, not on what D&D combat is usually focused on, which is the macro. First edition D&D, which I think is great. I like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons too. You go there and look at that one. It's really focused on the macro, like how you explore the dungeon, how you get the gold, the ways that you think about overcoming obstacles, and the fun time you have with your friends. Whereas 4th edition was really this like tactics game, very focused on the micro. Not that the micro was bad, the micro was very good, but it just took up a lot of time. Looking forward to reading about a pike battle in the Moonsong series. They're there. I mean, if you read the beginning of Needle Ash, that's the infantry are not using swords. They're using spears almost exclusively. You only use a sword when you're battling. And if you read Needle Ash, very first battle, Prince Michael, he rides into battle and he uses a variety of weapons to offend his opponents, including he doesn't use a sword to defeat another knight. He uses a warhammer because he knows that he can grapple and punch through the armor of his opponent. Using his warhammer, he can actually do damage where his sword just wouldn't be effective. So he doesn't even bother to use it. So there's a lot of tactical stuff in the battle in the beginning and the end of Needle Ash that I think you'd like if you are into things that are a little more looking towards the realistic. Now there's magic in those too. So my whole thing was like, if there's mages and they're of a certain limited quantity, how do they influence the tactics of battle? And so you have some competing strategies there because they are a potent force. They can, blow people up, basically light them on fire. That's really strong, but it's not strong enough to make it so like you would just use swords instead of spears. Spears are just awesome. Like that's what you would use. Do you think the only way to truly reverse the globalist society is through national group repatriation? I don't know. That might happen anyway, because it requires such a big welfare state to support immigration in Western countries. If the welfare state collapsed, people would repatriate themselves because they just wouldn't have anything else to do. Dan, that story really made me feel like a doomer. It sounded way too real to me. That's the point. It's kind of a black pill story. You started at Idaho, which is markedly Mormon. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of Mormons in Idaho. I know everyone thinks like Utah. There's Mormons all over. And there's a lot of Mormon communities in Idaho too, and in Colorado. It would be great to have communities where people knew each other. Yeah. This pandemic has actually helped me know my neighbors more because they're all extroverts. I got a bunch of cops living around me. I live in like Copland. They're all extroverts and they can't stand the idea of like staying at home. So they've been having like barbecues every night. It's just like a block party every night in my neighborhood. It's like, now it's a block party where we're not like sniffing each other's faces because like they're still aware. Like, we're not gonna shake hands, I guess, but we're still gonna all hang out and drink beers outside. That's what it's like. And so it's actually been interesting to think about. I think it's been harder on kids that are used to having that built-in social time with their peers. Not that they miss doing school work and the annoyance of the actual schoolwork, but they do miss their peers. I understand that. But I've been seeing in my neighborhood just like hordes of teenage girls riding around on their bikes every day. Teenage boys, they're off somewhere else, but the teenage girls are riding around the neighborhood on their bikes, just like hordes of them. It's really funny. Oh, thank you for the $5, the good senator. Have you ever played Kingdom Come Deliverance? I haven't played it, but thank you, and thanks for being a base Creation as always. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you for the super chat. I have it in Steam. I haven't played it. I don't know why I just didn't get around to it. It looked pretty cool, but I don't have that much time to play games, so I kind of have to pick and choose. I have some friends that are saying they want to play Vanilla WoW again. I don't know if they want to do it on a private server or what, but it's like that's like a time commitment, and I don't want to do it unless I know like other people are going to be in it with me, and it's going to be a social time or something. Let's see here. I think filmmaking especially needs to be decentralized. There should be major studios scattered throughout the country rather than California, New York, having industry near monopolies. Now, the reason for this is a technical monopoly reason. So the technical monopoly is just what's your labor you need in the movie industry is actors and people who know how to run cameras and stuff. And because everybody in the industry shares the same talent pool, you know, the feeling is, okay, we'll all be in the same town and everybody will move to us. Again, that labor motility. To have a really good actor, you know, you pretty much have to do things where all the actors are. But it's changing. You know, people are shooting in Georgia because it's cheaper to shoot there than LA, and LA has too many problems to shoot movies there. People have been shooting in Hawaii. People have been shooting in Texas in some cases. Like major studios have been outsourcing their production to other places. And if you're paying an actor like $10 million to do a movie, they damn well better be willing to fly out to Georgia for the shoots, you know. So they've been making them in different places. So I think it is becoming decentralized simply because LA is just such a terrible place to do business. But yeah, they all still live there because that's where they socialize with each other, I think. Seen the Michael Mann flick Collateral. You know what? I think I have. I think I have seen Collateral and make similar points about LA. Yeah. Michael King of the Cavalry. Needle Ash First Battle felt to me like being dropped on an RPG board. It really wasn't supposed to. It's supposed to be pretty accurate. But I don't know. I could see that. The American Shire got scoured when they accepted Mordor's currency as a means of exchange. Yeah, that fiat currency. Fiat currency, I mean, is an interesting topic in and of itself, and I don't want to get too deep into it because I've talked about it a bunch elsewhere. But through the magic of partial reserve banking, most of the currency that you think exists is purely imaginary. It's just deposit sheets and doesn't relate to any physical currency. You know, in fact, the Federal Reserve, when they make a loan, they simply credit an account on a computer. They don't really print money. There is a monetary base for most transactions, but they don't really. It doesn't really line up. They can just make credit as many things as they want with the Federal Reserve. They just write in the credit. So it's purely imaginary. And the danger of fiat currency is that when you have deflationary forces, they're multiplicative. So inflationary forces are multiplicative because if you take a dollar, if I print a dollar and I go deposit it, it actually creates 10 imaginary dollars because the bank takes the dollar, puts 10 cents on reserve, loans out 90 cents of it. That person takes that 90 cents and it ends up back in the bank because they pay somebody for a product or service and that person deposits it. The bank then puts 10% and it goes in the cycle to where you get $10 of imaginary currency and $1 of original currency. Well, when it deflates, it's also multiplicative. So if the bank calls in $1 of debts and someone pays them $1, they pay $1 to a bank and it just goes through and destroys $10 of currency that people are operating. It all goes to Milton Friedman's his theory of what is it called? He has a theory on the total quantity of money, his monetary theory, and it's very well tested. And this is exactly what happens. And this is one of the things that caused the Great Depression is that you had bank runs. So everybody ran to the bank to say, "Give me my money back." Well, the bank didn't have it on reserve, and it caused the bank to close, or they had to call in their debts from all the other banks, which in turn made those 10 imaginary dollars get squished down into one real dollar. You had, anytime a bank closed, 90% of the currency it was dealing with just disappeared. There was no way to recover it for the people who had deposits in the bank. It just disappeared. And so the total quantity of money decreased by 30% from 1930 to 1933. And in 1930, when that deflationary force started, the crash from 1929 had basically run its course. The economy was recovering. It was the Federal Reserve and just continued bad government action that made the Great Depression happen. It would have resolved itself within the year if the government hadn't bothered with all of the, or if the Federal Reserve had actually bailed out the banks to keep the deflationary effect from occurring. They're supposed to be the lender of last resort, and they refused to lend money to destroy certain banks, possibly by choice, which banks they destroyed. But I'll leave that up to you. Philip Manhart, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate how you presented magic in Needle Ash as a doomsday type weapon where you have to have an effective defense against it at all time. That's it. So the mages in that are constantly trying to counter the other mages. They're using their magic all the time to try to stop, you could think of like fire and ice, but they're constantly there to try to counter all the other mages. So you have to have a mage around you at all times as a king. Otherwise, someone could blast you apart with fire or use their spell, which they pulled from the infinite concept realm known as the Fae, to like rip your face off or turn you into a newt or something crazy like that. So you had to have somebody that could sense that magic and be able to counter it. And that was part of kind of the setup there. And it's pretty rare in Needle Ash. Like, most people are not mages. And when you find a mage, it's like, we're gonna draft you into the army and make good use of you because you are a powerful weapon. And the main character in it, Sharona, she can't really use magic the same way other people do. She uses magic in a different way, which allows her to do things better than some mages and worse than others, but definitely not the way that they had expected magic to be worked through. Yo, what's up? Actually, here in time for one of these. Thank you for joining us, Renier. Let's see here. Skipping the kill stream tonight to watch. Thank you. I don't care about John McAfee. John McAfee and Joe Rogan having sex with dwarves anyway. John McAfee's always a hoot, though. Mark Twain revealed in a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court that swords, spears, warhammers, etc. are unnecessary to win in medieval combat. All you need is a six-shooter. It's one of the first examples of portal fantasy, is that book. And so if you want a good piece of history, that's a good one to look at for portal fantasy. Basically, isekai. Thanks for your Last of Us 2 video. Thank you for watching. So I found your channel. I'll have some content on writing zombies tomorrow. It's made me more discriminatory when it comes to the stories I consume. What's your opinion on A Song of Ice and Fire? I read the first book years ago at this point, like 15 years ago. I don't remember how long ago. I think I was still in college. And I thought it was okay. I didn't really feel like continuing the series. I didn't watch any of the TV show because I don't really watch TV. I watched the first 1 or 2 episodes and I just couldn't continue. It was way too slow moving. It was really soap opera-y and boring, and just didn't interest me at all. And that's not to say if you didn't find it boring that I'm like name calling you. People like different things. I personally did not care for the TV show and the book. Especially the way the first book ended with, I think, like everyone, the main character getting killed and like everyone getting betrayed. It was clear that George R.R. Martin was kind of riding by the seat of his pants and kind of pulled that one kind of out of his butt at the end. I just didn't. No one I cared about survived the first book, so I never read another book. And that's the real thing about A Song of Ice and Fire, is that there's no characters I care about in the game or in the movie, series, books, whatever. There's no characters I care about succeeding or failing. That just doesn't make me want to read the book. It makes me want to put it down. They're all nihilistic, amoral garbage. For societies such as China, is a liberal democracy not preferable? China under a more authoritarian government is becoming one of the most successful countries in the world. I don't know. I'm trying not to think in those kinds of dichotomies, because we exist in mixtures of, authoritarianism and freedom. China gives its citizens certain freedoms. The U.S. gives its citizens certain freedoms and certain licenses, but not others. So we don't live in a totally democratic society either, and they don't live in a totally authoritarian society either. It's more authoritarian than ours for sure, but you're always looking at mixtures, right? Like they have capitalist elements in the communist society. There's capitalist businesses making money. We have to kind of move past thinking in those kinds of, black and white terms, I think. Did you name Sharona after the song? No, I didn't. I just thought that was her name. Martin's books are all about subversion. It's like Ryan Johnson's dream. The main character who's nice and good dies at the end. It made me not read any more books. And I wouldn't say, subversion is not always bad. Surprise is not always bad. But once you do it a lot, then it just becomes, there's nothing to grasp onto. I read the first novel of A Song of Ice and Fire. I turned the last page and realized that I'd been trolled by the author and walked away from the series. I kind of felt that way. I didn't mind it. It was okay. It was a big surprise at the end, but it's like, you're going to read the next book. It's like, why? There's nothing to read. It was kind of how I felt. I'm like, there's nothing more to read. It's like, yeah, what's the sequel to, it's like they blow everything up at the end of Planet of the Apes 2. It's like, well, what's the sequel? It's like they blew everything up. They blew the world up. I don't know. Well, you're going to go see the sequel? Why would I? Same reason I never saw the Blade Runner sequel. It's like, why would I? I don't want to watch a sequel. If there was a warlord obsessed with fire, riding a dragon, leading a horde of nomadic pillagers, but she was a cute blonde girl protagonist, she ends up being evil anyway. It's like, I've been the evil one the whole time. Jared says he lost interest after season 1. It was a little too slow moving for me and felt like a soap opera. And my wife didn't like it. It was a little too violent and kind of yucky for her. She didn't like it. I didn't really care for it. If you like it, that's okay. It's okay, though. Everybody likes different stuff. Do you think the leaders of the Hong Kong protests were working for the globalists? I have no idea, man. I didn't look that close into it or why they were doing it. Or obviously mainlanders have a different view of Hong Kong than I think the liberal Western press that wants to kind of lionize anyone that's like pro-worker or something. For me, subversion only works the first time. I agree, Renier. After that, everyone else is trying to do it as a poser. So if you're John Cage, the first time someone opens up their keyboard to not play any music, it's pretty interesting. It's a pretty funny little effect. The first time someone walks in and the music is microphones attached to your throat, you chewing crackers, that's cool. 50 years later, people are still doing it. You're a hack. Someone already challenged your idea of what music and art was 50, 60 years ago at this point. Be done with it. Make something that sounds good, please. The Blade Runner sequel is good because it's got this hot Cuban chick in it. Well, at least it's got something. All right, let's play some games, and I'll read more chat as we play. Where's my OBS? Here we go. Ba-ba-ba-bum. Get that sweet music going. Here we go. Bethesda Softworks. It's like we care more. Bethesda's, I noticed like gaming critics always hate on Bethesda. They're like, Bethesda, bugs. They're like the Grinch with the noise. And all the bugs. And the glitches and the bugs. Old Bethesda, they always focused on the macro, in fact, the meta. They focused on the biggest parts of the game, the big ideas, and they didn't worry about... They tried to get rid of as many bugs as possible, but, bugs happen. And to me, the bugs are kind of part of the fun. Oh, I can't see my chat now. Let's fix that real quick. That beautiful music. All right, I think we're going to start the main quest just because. It's because I feel like that. So, Wayne and Priory. Let's go over there. Is there a technical difference between authoritarianism and totalitarianism? Yeah, authoritarianism means, a strong central authority. Totalitarianism means there's nothing that isn't the state. Is generally what it is. So you can have an authoritarian regime that there's still things which are not the state. A totalitarian regime is more like North Korea. There's nothing which is not the state. Everything is the state. See?
Well met. I'm
a dark elf.
Aaron was the name, and this is Wayne on Priory. If he's not sleeping or eating, he'll be fussing with his books, I reckon, over in the Priory house. You too.
Now, we do actually get like a horse here, so that'll be nice. Let's see, he's probably in here. Oh, thank you for the $10, David Dilks. Sorry, I and L next to each other.
Let's hear it.
Brother Piner.
Welcome, good citizen.
I appreciate that.
I'm Brother Piner, and this is Wayne and Priory.
By the way,
Monastery.
the final chapter of Eyes in the Walls, if you've been listening to the audiobook online, so that's out right now. Check the playlist section of my channel if you want to listen to the entire audiobook for this for free. People really like the ending. The ending really blows them away, so do stick around and read all the way to the end and do some thoughts about what the ending really means. Hopefully you'll like it. Women... Here we go. Where's Joffrey?
Oh, yes. He'll be in the Priory House somewhere. We are a monastic order devoted to divine Talos, who was the mortal Tiber Septim, the founder of the Empire.
The
Like
Blades.
members of my order, the Blades are devoted to the divine Talos. We honor them for their dedication and devotion.
Yeah, playlist is finished, Zach. You can watch the whole thing. You can listen to the whole thing.
Good day.
Yes? Can I help you?
I must speak to
He's
Joffrey.
upstairs. Go ahead.
Thank you. I love this music. It's like clarinet line. Little orchestration tip for you musicians. Clarinets and French horns always tend to have a reflective kind of somber sound because their sound is reflected. Clarinets are pointed at the floor, so you hear their sound reflected off of the floor. And horns are pointed at the back wall, so their sound is reflected off of the back wall. So you'll notice if you want, whenever good orchestrators are using horns, like the Force theme in the original Star Wars, is played on a French horn the first time you hear it. It's reflective. It sounds like something echoing because that's what you hear. You hear the echo more than the real sound of the horn. And if you're to listen to a French horn at the bell or try to mic it at the bell, it won't sound right. You should never mic a French horn at the bell. It will not sound correct at all. I brought you the Amulet of Kings.
Emperor Uriel? Do you know something about his death?
I was there when he died.
You'd better explain yourself. Now. You brought me the Amulet of Kings? This cannot be.
Why has the video game industry stopped innovating? The graphics are better, but everything else is worse. I'm not sure. I think... So first of all, if you do complex systems, you're going to lose part of the audience. The hardcore gaming audience that built the industry is not the audience that continues to buy games. If you want to go wide, you have to keep the systems pretty simple. That's why Mass Effect 2 is dumbed down from Mass Effect 1. It's why Dragon Age 2 is dumbed down from the original Dragon Age, is that you're trying to pull in more people. And I think that they always approach that with thinking people are too stupid or would be annoyed by complex systems, especially in an RPG.
What do you know of the Emperor's death? As unlikely as your story sounds, I believe you. Only the strange destiny of Uriel Septim could have brought you to me carrying the Amulet of Kings.
The most amazing thing about fascism is how idiosyncratic it is. Most people assume that fascism is inherently racist, but it doesn't need to be. No, it doesn't have to be. You know, it's an economic. I mean, it's an economic system that was and really has passed. So people talking about fascism unironically today are generally just trying to say bad man over there, fascist over there, bad man. They're not being serious about someone actually being a fascist because they wouldn't even bother with that. Fascists were socialists, right? They were leftists economically, and if they were right wingers, then it's because they were king and country right wingers, not right wingers in the way that we usually think about it. Who is this Prince of Destruction?
The Prince of Destruction he referred to is none other than Mehrunes Dagon, one of the lords of the demonic world of Oblivion. The Emperor's words, "Close shut the jaws of Oblivion," certainly suggest that he perceived some threat.
Mark 27 makes a good point. You only remember good kings from the past and notice the current bad ones. So this has to do with filtering. I talk about this in Does Today's Music Suck? As I have this video, does today's music suck? It's one of my more popular videos, and the truth is most music sucks, and most music from the past sucks. But what people do is they engage in this kind of filtering where they continue to listen to the good crap that came out when they were 19, or the things that they're really attached to when they were 19, and just forget about everything else. So they're like, man, music was so good in 1972. That's when Led Zeppelin 4 came out. And it's like, that's also when this song was a #1 hit. And they're like, that's bad. It's like, that's what was popular, dude. Like, most of the things that are popular suck, and we just forget them. They just get filtered away. I did the same thing with, like, why do Hollywood movies suck? It's like, you just are forgetting a lot of bad ones due to the way that we filter things. You notice current bad ones, but forget about the bad ones of the past because you don't continue to watch them. They don't occupy headspace. Only the good movies do. So how come there's no good movies like Back to the Future? It's like there weren't a lot of good movies in the 80s, too. There were good movies, but there weren't quite as many as you think, because you remember the good ones. Like, I remember 10 good movies from the 80s. It's like there were hundreds and hundreds of movies put out in the 80s, and most of them sucked. So that is something that tends to happen. And so when you put that bias aside and you really look at it, and you're able to compare like to like, I think you can still make a good case that games are no longer innovating and a lot of them suck. And that's really what it is. You have to put that bias aside, but if you do, and you can see the ways that they do. A lot of gameplay hasn't evolved or has been simplified at the systems level. Now, platformers have actually gotten simpler. If you compare like the original Tomb Raider to like the newer Tomb Raider ones, the original had harder platforming. Is it a better game? I don't really necessarily think it's a better game. The newer ones definitely have like way better combat and stuff like that. But it's it's just the way that design has persisted. Has anyone come out with tactics games on the level of Final Fantasy Tactics? No, they're not coming out with them because the systems, I think, are too complex for regular players. At least that's the assumption. Only smaller studios are coming out with those things on PC. And when they do come out, people really love them. Like the Mount and Blade games and games like that. People really love when they're different. So you do have to be aware of that bias. It is a thing.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that certain things haven't gotten worse. Some things have gotten worse in terms of design.
Saint Alicia herself received it from the gods.
Do you know of any multiplayer war games that have FPS players versus RTS players? And do you think something like that would work out? Would people like it? I'm not aware of that. Planet side, I mean, you could probably do something like that within like Planet side, but I don't know.
For the first time in centuries. It may be that the dragonfires protected us from a threat that only the Emperor was aware of.
The Emperor asked me to find his son. Every LJN game, yeah. If you go to the Atari, it's like more like 99% of the games were bad.
A baby boy lay sleeping in a basket.
Yeah, in an essay in 1946, George Orwell noted that the word fascist has been reduced to the meaning very bad thing.
But I knew it was his son. From time to time, he would ask about the child's progress. Now it seems that this illegitimate son is the heir to the Septim throne, if he yet lives. His name is Martin. He serves Akatosh in the chapel in the city of Kvatch, south of here. You must go to Kvatch and find him at once. If the enemy is aware of his existence, as seems likely, he is in terrible danger.
All right, after this, the Oblivion gates will start opening up.
My resources here are limited, but I will help in any way I can.
Okay. So do you think punctuation and grammar in English is pretty complex compared to most languages? I don't know most languages well enough to answer that. I think Latin... So formal Latin is way more complex than English, in my experience. Formal Latin, you're modifying like the stem of every single word to determine its grammatical function, and you can place the words in any order. Makes it interesting to write poetry, and to read poetry too, if you're reading classical poetry like from ancient Rome. That being said, the way people actually spoke Latin, informal Latin, it's not that much more complex than English. Basically, you put the words in the same order that you would in English or a standard Romance language. Like, if you wanted to say, you'd probably think you'd usually have the adjective after the noun, but you'd have, subject, predicate, or subject, verb, object, the way that you would in most kinds of basic Latin languages. So formal Latin is really complex. I think what makes English weirder is that we have so many different languages that pay into English. We have different spellings for the same word, but they have different meanings. There's a lot of weird things in English when you think about it. Baris.
One of the youngest blades ever to serve in the Emperor's personal guard. I am glad to hear that he survived.
Yeah, ancient
but I
Greek
fear
has
he will take
crazy
the
verbs
Emperor's
too.
death particularly hard.
The cool thing about formal Latin, though, is that once you know it, it's not that hard to deal with.
It will be safest here with me. When you return with Martin, we will figure out our next move. I keep a few things here in my chest to resupply traveling blades. Help yourself to whatever you need.
What are your thoughts on Dean Koontz? He's just... you know, I haven't read a Dean Koontz book in a long time. Why am I drifting? What is going on here? Oh, I got a 360 controller plugged in down here. And so it's wanting to use the 360 controller for some reason. There you go. Take the arrows, bow. Of course, the healing potions. Anything else? Steel claymore. I don't need that stuff. I'm over encumbered. How did I get over encumbered? How did this happen? I have this dwarven blade, which is good. What are we dropping? Oh, I have a steel bow already. We'll put one back. I don't need that steel short sword anymore. I could probably sell that or toss it. I have 3 of them, apparently. Yeah, put 3 of them in there. Why not? Something's weighing me down. Need to make more potions. Trials of St. Alessia. Oh yeah, you can get some early... Oh, it's not a spell-making altar. Needs a key. I think he opens that up later. Let's go grab Sean Bean here. Head up to Kavach. Oh, wait. First, let's hop on his horse. I think we get to get on his horse. Maybe we talk to him. Well, you can also do them at...
Your first Priam Averil and Brother...
Oh, yeah. Priam Averil will give you a horse. That's it.
He is a priest in the chapel of Unique.
Alright. It's fine. Prior.
No time. You must find Martin before the end.
Sim?
What do you... Here, perhaps you will find this useful. One of the books I saved for my blades training. You go into danger. Joffrey didn't tell us any more than that, but know that our prayers go with you.
Oh, you can deactivate... you can use joystick in the Aina. I didn't know that.
It is Blades work. We are honored to have Grand Master Joffrey, or Brother Joffrey as he prefers, as a resident here.
Koontz wrote a series of books about a character named Odd Thomas. Probably read the books, not watch the movie. I barely can tolerate movies, is what it's like now.
I know that you are on an important mission for the Blades. Please, if you need a horse...
There we go. We got a horse now. Not a fast horse.
Go with Talos' blessings. Do not fail.
Fallout New Vegas or Oblivion if you had one game. Oblivion for sure. New Vegas was a good game, but I like Oblivion a lot more. New Vegas had a lot of fun things too, but ultimately, I mean, I just like Fallout much less than Elder Scrolls. The setting is just not very interesting to me, and the gameplay of all the Elder Scrolls games I prefer a lot more. Nothing to say anything bad against Fallout. I never bought Fallout 4 because I just never found it cheap enough to where I was willing to buy it. When I saw that dialogue wheel when they were announcing it, and they had like that dialogue wheel, I was like, I'm not buying this. I do not like to see dialogue wheels infest other games. I think it's one of the things that like gaming historians will look back on in 20 years and be like, you know, the 2010s were the decade of dialogue wheels. After the success of Mass Effect in 2009, they started putting dialogue wheels into every game. Warcraft started having dialogue, you know, just like everything has dialogue wheels now. I hate them. They don't make you think. They make you just not think about what you're doing at all. You're like, press the heart, and you will flirt with them, and they will like you. Press the heart button. Let me press the red button and be a bad guy. Let me press the blue button and be a good guy. I hate dialogue wheels. The original Dragon Age was awesome. It didn't have those pieces of garbage. Now we have the horse, we can just fast travel. Save us a little bit of time. Oh, wait. We do have... we are already here at Coral, so we might as well do this Francois Motieri thing. Have you tried Beyond Skyrim mod for Skyrim? Reintroduced Bruma, and they got plans for more. I haven't. I've played around a lot of Skyrim mods. Right now, I think I need to reinstall Skyrim and like rebuild it. It doesn't want to play nice with an ultra-wide monitor, which is what I play on, which is why you can see so much. It doesn't like to play nice with ultra-wide monitors, so I'm gonna have to like redo all my mods to get it working. It just isn't working right now at all. It's all right. I haven't played Skyrim in a while. Now I actually have the Switch version of Skyrim, but it's like, to me, it's like unplayable. The field of view is so narrow; it's really hard to play without getting like obnoxiously motion sick. But oddly, I don't get motion sick if I'm doing like VR stuff. So I think I'd rather try out like Skyrim VR or like get the VR mod for like the PC version or something and do that. Use like my phone as a VR system. Will video games ever be respected as much as movies? I think they're already respected more. Once the boomers die off, yeah. You know, it's only people who don't know anything about games who don't respect them. You know? I think I need, what do I need? This Lingerwine blade. Yep. Oh, I'm not gonna be trespassing when I go in, but I still have to pick the lock. Way to make me do like an unnecessary thing, Vincent. Make me do this picking the lock business.
Oh, well, hello. You must be the one Lucien Lachance told me about. I've been expecting you. We haven't got much time, I'm afraid. I borrowed quite a bit of gold from some underworld types.
Yeah.
Missed the payment.
Like Oblivion, just fall back on... Yeah, Good Senator says he likes shooters better at the end of the day. That's why I talked about Kingdom Come Deliverance. Yeah, I mean, I dig the gameplay of New Vegas a lot. It's really good.
Well, when Khajiit Argonians gets here, I'll put on a little act. You'll cut me with your poison knife.
Tried to make my Skyrim 4K and it has hated me from that day. Do you feel happy that you're a Gen Xer, not a boomer? I'm Gen Y.
If you wait a day, my body will be put on display in the Coral Chapel undercroft. You can come to me then and administer the antidote. Got all that? Good. Khajiit Argonians will be here any moment. Get ready.
Alright, so I gotta kill this guy. think I can just like, you can just like go hog wild here too and just steal everything if you want. You know. Mochieri, I know you're in there. My employers are most displeased. He has to do a... Gotta do a... I'm going hog wild, but there's nothing in here to steal. Paintbrush and yarn. Bro, no wonder you want me to kill you. You're broke.
Oh no! What am I to do? An underworld enforcer and a dark brotherhood assassin, both here to kill poor Francois.
The Dark Brotherhood.
Motieri has been slashed with the Langerwine blade and appears to have died from the wounds as expected. I must now flee from Coral and leave Hyde's heart alive.
Good evening.
I love this calm music. Is this guy gonna pursue me out of the house? I guess not. He just like ran out the door. Okay. We wait around for a day and then we can revive him. I have fled Coral, and Hyde's heart has not been killed. I must now wait a day so that Motieri can be discovered and placed in the Coral Chapel Undercroft. There I must find Motieri and administer the antidote that will revive him. And... so let me go back in. We'll hang out at the Mages Guild. Have you ever tried to pick door locks in real life? Your first time makes you feel like a boss. I have. I've done like little practice locks. There's a whole channel called Lockpicking Lawyer that is just him like instantly picking pick-proof locks. Pretty good. Pretty fun channel. Let's see here. Let's find a bed. I think the music is part of what makes this game so good. Thomas Soul or Sole, I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. Thomas Soul's music is awesome for this. How is this bed owned? Where's an unowned bed? I am sleepy. I think I could probably wake this guy up and then just sleep in bed.
A pleasure to make your acquaintance. I'm busy.
Can't. Alright, fine. We'll just wait. For... Hold on. Have I leveled up? Oh, no. Let's make sure I haven't. Alright. Let's wait. 24 hours. It's the only non-shooter RPG that kept coming back because of how quests are designed. Okay. I'll definitely check out Kingdom Come then. Gen Y are not millennials. They are a distinct cohort. Their experiences are different from millennials. I've talked about this many times. I did a bunch of content on Gen Y. Gen Y is like 75 to 85. And millennials are like 85 to 95. And after that, you start getting, you know, you're getting like Zoomers. Gen Z. And that's because, you know, we had Gen Y, we grew up with no internet. Millennials grew up with internet. We grew up with failed institutions. Gen Xers grew up with institutions that were still intact. Marriage and public education still were largely functional. They were failing but hadn't failed. Gen Y, we were basically... we were raised in daycare. You know, we had inherited the failed institutions completely. That's why Gen Y has nostalgia as such a powerful force. Like, people around my age, this Final Fantasy VII thing's a great example. They're just, you know, the nostalgia is really a powerful feeling. I have administered the Langerwine antidote, and Francois Motieri has wakened from his poison-induced sleep. I should now speak with him and make sure he's well enough to travel to the Grey Mare. I think I need my enchanted blade here. Because some ghosts are going to be coming out of the wall. Oh, I have a silver dagger. That'll work too. Silver dagger.
Oh, I'm a bit stiff, but quite fine otherwise. Ah, yes, the Undercroft. My family members are buried here, you know. Which leads me to something I may have failed to mention before. My ancestors will see my revival as a desecration of their tomb. This Undercroft is, well, quite cursed.
Yeah, for millennials, it's always current year. For Gen Y, it's like remember the good old days.
And defend their resting place. I can hear them coming as we speak.
Oh, I gotta fight some undead.
Protect me.
Fun.
Escort me to the Grey Mare where I can buy passage out of Coral. Ah, here they come. Oh my, Aunt Margaret. You are looking the worse for wear.
Where are they? Oh, okay, there's one. Alright. Let's put on our heavy armor. And let us go ahead and just summon Dremora. Should be some ghosts and stuff still.
Is it not safe?
Wait here.
Very well. I will wait here until you return. You will return, won't you?
Oh, come on, bud. You're not making this easy on me. Go stay in the corner until I kill all of these Modieri zombies. I will let you come out in a minute, okay? Go, come on. Come to me. I don't want this guy to die in this. My Tremora aggro him a little bit. Now I can see him a little better. Come on. Come on, Francois. Stop trying to fight the monsters. My job is to kill them. Your job is to not die so I can get my quest rewards. Let's see if there's any more. I think that's it. Alright, so we dispatched the zombies. Your comments on how Japan's tight culture maybe reflect how there's an infinite amount of school life manga and how there's none of the sort here. There's some, but it's just, I mean, like, there's not really manga. There's, like, you know, school life TV shows. Alright, let's tell him to follow me now.
Is it not safe?
Follow me.
Very good. Let us hurry to the Grey Mare.
It's you. What can I do for you? Bye.
Come on, Francois. To the Grey Mare we go. What do you think about the Lost Generation, Ernest Hemingway's generation, the one that fought in World War I? Produced a lot of famous bad writers. I don't know. I don't have any. I didn't live it, and I didn't know them really, so I don't know. My great grandpa was in World War I. Still have his flask, so that's cool. Here we go. Sound might have a bit of an echo because I'm not using headphones.
Ah, the Grey Mare. From
These
here
headphones
I will be able to arrange for transport
would annoy me.
in
It's
our
really
city.
hot.
You have served me well, assassin.
I'm gonna turn it down a little bit.
Forever in your debt. Farewell.
What do you think of the people who read Oblivion books and come up with all the crazy, insane fan theories about what they actually mean? I think that's fun. I think it's cool that they have enough contradictory lore that they can do that. I think it's actually kind of a cool detail. I think I appreciate it. All right, Shadenhall. Yeah, see, here's Morrowind. Shadenhall's kind of like Morrowind. You've got Leyawiin, which is like Black Marsh and Elsewhere, just kind of combined together. And two races just like hate each other intensely. Pelennor Whitestreak is a Terminator with laser eyes. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. Quickly. Gotta get to the abandoned house before I die. Okay. Do you think boomers are more self-righteous or millennials are? Boomers. Millennials are very self-righteous, but boomers are worse. Boomers are like, we are the hippies that changed the world. It's like, dude, you ruined the world. You changed it to be worse in every possible meaningful way other than technology. Put technology to the side. Cyrodiil's jungle was a translation error. Apparently, it wasn't so bad the Imperials and Morrowind from Cyrodiil were fooled by it. Yeah, early 20th century lit. It's a bunch of like it's much ado about nothing. It's a great example of the modern approach or the structuralist approach, which emphasizes style over anything meaningful, and also, how should I put this? It's about its own aesthetic. So if you read something like James Joyce, it's almost unreadable. It's only interesting to people who know all the styles he's trying to iterate in Ulysses. It's the most abandoned book ever, for good reason. I think most of Ernest Hemingway's books are okay. I think, for instance, Great Gatsby is very overrated.
So Montieri has escaped.
Very, very overrated. And it's really a revenge fantasy by a gamma male. It's a guy who's a sexual loser writing a fantasy about women he
I
hated.
hereby bestow upon you the title of Eliminator.
That's why, like, Daisy is such a,
You exemplify everything that
I don't know,
brotherhood
bitch.
stands.
And she has a husband, Tom, who beats her. That's Fitzgerald looking at men who are men and trying to put bad things upon them. Men who are masculine must beat their wives. Women are bitches who stay with men who beat them. Like, it's a very sexual loser approach and viewpoint for what's going on. Cruelty's heart. All right. Next one.
Well, now,
Do you think
are
boomers would have
ambitious,
protested
aren't
World War
you?
II if they'd somehow lived back
I'm afraid
then?
I have no more contracts for you. Our time working together has come to an
Oh
end.
no.
Instead, you must report to Ochiva, here in the sanctuary. She will be providing all your contracts from now on, and is waiting for you as we speak.
Yeah, boomers are the first generation that didn't allow their children to have access to generational wealth like they did, and they wonder why all the children hate capitalism. Yeah. I mean, it's part of it. I mean, there's so many things that go into why there's resentment towards baby boomers. They destroyed the social institutions that the kids needed to have, and that's why Gen Y is so lonely. Gen X is so lonely. Oh, wait. I'm already a vampire. So if you're already a vampire, he won't offer to bite you. But if you aren't one, he'll offer to turn you into a vampire. The Cyrodiilic jungle was a thing solved by Talos using Thum, and mastery of Chim to rewrite history using magic so that Cyrodiil was temperate/pleasant. Where is Ochiba?
So much about you.
You again. Foul-smelling ape. Ah, dear friend, steal a moment of your time. I have a rather...
Yeah, the boomers in the US didn't compete with the rest of the world. They were dealing with bombed-out economies.
This is a personal matter, and will have no...
And they imported vast waves of immigrants to replace the children they didn't have.
Would you like to hear?
And they wonder why their children resent them. Prayer to Holy Trinity and all our 999 angels to soon encompass Earth. With good news that this world crisis is soon to end. Stay safe, Dave, and all. Thank you. I appreciate that. But I think this crisis will end, and probably soon. People will either go one way or the other. I don't think it's going to be tolerable to have a continued economy shut down. That doesn't mean people should abandon basic precautions like washing your hands, and if you are around exposed populations, for sure, wearing a mask. But I think the idea that we're going to be under some extreme pandemic is quickly evaporating from people's minds, that they are in immediate danger.
I find your decision most agreeable.
So I feel pretty good about that, George. I appreciate the super chat too, by the way. Thank you for the £9.99.
Bog water. Hiding in that swamp, you will find an Argonian shadow scale named Scartail. Kill this renegade and bring me his heart as proof of the deed.
What do you think America's standing in the world will be if China ends up becoming the #1 superpower? I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like.
When Ochiba and I trained,
I have no idea. And I don't know if China will be like an ascendant power or not, or if we'll have a new period of more world anarchy, like international anarchy, realist anarchy. I don't know. Who knows?
When our training was completed, we reluctantly parted ways. But now, the unthinkable has happened.
Just found an ant crawling on me.
Has fled Black Marsh and refuses
I had like a huge ant problem. I thought I got rid of them all. But apparently there's a few lingering scouts.
Treachery must be punished. Just as a member of the Dark Brotherhood cannot kill a fellow family member, a shadow scale is forbidden from slaying another shadow scale. That is why you must go to Bogwater and eliminate that treacherous snake. Please kill Skytail so Chiva and I can put this matter behind us. In the Argonian homeland of Black Marsh, those born under the sign of the Shadow are taken at birth and presented to the Dark Brotherhood. A shadow scale hatchling is...
How can he see? His pupils are covered by his hood. Maybe he's only looking at my chest. If you could write the story for any AAA game you wanted, what would it be? A Final Fantasy game.
Who lives to come of age is accepted into the Dark
Final Fantasy.
as a full member of the family.
You probably know why immediately, which is that I don't have to stick to any kind of pre-existing universe. I can write something new and original. And I can write it in a narrative style that is good, with characters that are good. You know, I could actually exercise my storytelling capacity. What makes a game good is its gameplay, not just its story. And in fact, the best stories are emergent, but Final Fantasy is narrative. It's a narrative game, and that I think that would work perfect for what my capacities are.
Ah, greetings.
Whoa, she has red eyes. Those are cool.
As Vicente surely told you, your time working with him has come to an end. From now on, you will receive all assignments directly from me. In fact, your next contract is available now.
So, when they announce that the virus is over, even with today's science, trust them. No. Recalling the Black Plague wasn't thoroughly over till someplace in the mid-19th. Yeah, the people think the Black Plague is like a singular event, and it wasn't. It came in, it moved, flared up, died down, the Black Plague was many plagues that happened really, like you said, over centuries. And there were multiple other plagues, like smallpox, that came in and decimated different populations, reduced them by significant amounts too. There were lots of plagues in Europe. There were plagues going back to the Roman times. The Black Plague may not have been very novel. It just may not have been around that much in the Middle Ages until it really blew up in, say, the 13th century, 14th century. So yeah, I mean, no, you don't believe them. The coronavirus is not that dangerous for most people, and it's kind of like the flu, but it's very dangerous for particular parts of the population. And I think people will probably have, from now on, regardless of what the government says or what the media says, they're going to have a little bit more cautious approach to flu season, and they ought to. The flu has always been something that's very dangerous for vulnerable populations. People die of the flu every year. My wife has always been very paranoid about the flu, and during flu season, it's like we won't go out and do those things. We won't go to, the kids. We don't let the kids play at the McDonald's play place if we're traveling somewhere. We don't do that stuff during flu season because we have more vulnerable elder adults in our family, and if they got the flu, it could hospitalize them or possibly kill them. And so this one's just that, but pumped up a little bit more, So I think people are going to be more cautious going forward because they're just more aware of potential impacts from it. Like anybody that knows someone who died, my neighbor, he had a family friend die a couple weeks ago of it, and it was really shocking. It's really makes it hammer home if you know someone that's had it or someone that got really ill, someone that died. Saw that someone who was in his 20s ended up having sepsis and all kinds of other things, just cascading health effects, and he was in good health when he got it. So it just makes people pay more attention to how diseases with very small mortality rates, through the magic of large numbers, can have a big impact. They really can. So it's just an example. Any advice for contrarian teacher in public schools who feel like his soul is dying due to woke culture initiatives permeating everything? Well, if you have tenure, and you can get tenure, then that helps because that gives you a lot more options. So when I had tenure, there was a presentation that somebody in special ed was giving about white privilege or something, and I just stood up and walked out. And nothing happened to me. There's very little consequence, honestly, for standing up and doing whatever you want to do, because administration is so not used to anybody ever asserting what they want to do in the classroom as a teacher. And honestly, it's not even if you're an administrators honestly don't even really care. They just want you to have good test scores because that's what they're judged on. They are trying to achieve these metrics of achievement.
In the Imperial City,
that's what they really care about.
Be removed from existence. Finding this person may prove.
So I stood up and walked out. Nothing bad happened, but then more people walked out. They're just I know I'm required to be here, but I refuse to listen to somebody tell me about how I'm evil for being white.
I knew you wouldn't be able to resist. Your target is a high elf named Phalian. He lives somewhere in the Imperial City and fancies long walks.
Isn't Needle Ash already a Final Fantasy game? It could be.
That's all we know.
What are your thoughts on the Manic Pixie Dream Girl archetype?
Which establishments he
I don't know what that is, though.
Or anything about his schedule.
Manic Pixie Girl? Pixie Dream Girl?
Will require a bit of
I don't know.
detective work. I suggest you speak to your fellow brothers and sisters and see if they can offer any
I think,
advice.
answering Ash's question, I do think the American Empire is the British Empire 2.0.
The Imperial City is also home to an Imperial Legion captain named Adamus Philida. Do you know who that is?
I do not who that is.
Philida has dedicated his life to eradicating the Dark Brotherhood, and he becomes rather irate when our duties take us to the Imperial
Got about
City.
20 more minutes.
When that happens, he tends to make our lives uncomfortable. Let's not give the good captain any reason to go poking around in our affairs, If possible, do away with Phalian someplace out of the way. Definitely indoors with no other people around. A secure location with no witnesses.
See, I like this kind of thing. I feel like an assassin. I feel like a real assassin doing this in Oblivion. Never felt that way in Skyrim.
Receive a nice
Like, I had to actually case the joint, figure out where he moved, follow him somewhere. You know, I just never really felt like I had to do any of that cool stuff in Skyrim. So next time they do a game like this and they have a Dark Brotherhood, rather than trying to have it be really cool, they need to just tell you who you need to kill and like what requirements are there, and just let you figure it out. And it makes you feel a lot more bonded to, you know, your role there.
Mother has been smiling upon you, I hope.
I missed Good Senator's message, but, you know, God bless you, dude. Saw it disappear or something. I don't know what the Manic Pixie Dream Girl archetype is, but I'll have to see what you mean by that. Zoe Deschanel is in just about anything. Oh, that's the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. I still can't think of like things that define her. She's a very plain person, I think. Do fillet it in the pool. Yeah, you got to kill him with the special arrow later. Skyrim was all about thieves for some reason. Thieves that for no reason were Daedric cultists. Well, they followed Nocturnal. It was an okay thing. I feel like the Thieves Guild and the Murderers Guild in this one, the Dark Brother in this one, were way more open. Just kind of left you to figure stuff out, and it made you feel more like a thief and more like a real assassin.
I never suggest you forfeit a bonus, of course, but killing Phalian indoors is so unappealing. Too bad.
Sorry, got some allergies going on.
But first, I guess you have to find him, right? The elven races of the Imperial City are a community.
Well, I mean, the Daedric cultists make sense. Like, in this one, the head of the Thieves Guild, the Grey Fox, stole the cowl from Nocturnal and is, like, cursed as a result. Which I really liked.
Welcome to the family. I hug you, but Ojiba told me not to. Now, this is what I'm talking about. Kill him up close, face to face, and you still get the bonus. I wish all the contracts were like that. Happy hunting, my brother.
Let's see if I can... Alright, I gotta find Phalian and kill him, but first we're gonna continue with the main quest. We're gonna get this done right now. Can I go out here yet? I don't remember if she gave me the key yet. Yeah, I did. Okay. Yeah, not having the Skyrim Thieves Guild quest be a giant heist was a mistake, because that's what ends this one. It's just a gigantic, huge heist, which is so fun. When you build up to it, you do all these heists, and then you sneak into the tower, you steal an Elder Scroll from a blind monk priest, and then you drop down the flue and escape, you know, with your Boots of Spring Hill Jack. And you can, by the way, if you can survive the fall without dying, you can fortify your acrobatics, like with the spell. Then you can keep the Boots of Spring Hill Jack, and you can use those to like jump on top of houses and stuff. And I really miss that in the newer game, that they just didn't have you able to jump on top of houses. Jumping on houses is very fun.
Come on, run while there's still time. The guard still holds the road, but it's only a matter of time before they're overwhelmed.
Run from what?
You don't know, do you?
Yeah, the final quests for Thieves Guild are like the best in Oblivion. And final quests for all of the guilds are really good, actually, in this game. Really good. So the Fighters Guild one is awesome. You get super high and kill a bunch of villagers, and then have to deal with that. Dark Brotherhood, you basically become, you kill off everybody.
Kvatch is a smoking ruin. We're all that's left. Do you understand me?
Mages Guild, you gotta kill Manny Marco, and it's like an epic dungeon crawl to get to him.
It was sadly and madly.
Like everybody sacrifices their life to give you this special crystal so you can kill him.
Right through the city gates.
Philip Manhart, $5. Thank you. The guilds in Oblivion are much more fleshed out and deeper than Skyrim. In Skyrim, you become the hero, leader, mega badass without really earning it. It's true. The worst, I think, is the companions who you run into them, they make you a companion. One quest later, you're a werewolf.
It's too late.
They made werewolves way too accessible in Skyrim.
Run when you can.
You should really get to a healer.
Manic pixie dream girls are energetic, cheerful, bubbly young women. I think I prefer that rather than what we have, which is just like doom and gloom women who are covered in soot and angry and talk in a low voice. I prefer the manic pixie dream girl. But yeah, I agree with you, Philip. Like, they're way better in this one. They're way more fleshed out. You don't really earn it in a bunch of places. I think the Thieves Guild one, you kind of feel that way because you really do a lot. You really do a lot in that one. Dark Brotherhood.
It's gone. The Imperial line is dead.
It's just,
The covenant is broken.
I don't know. You just kind of go through the motions. It's okay. They're all okay, but they're just not as good. And it's because they give you too much intense directive. And like finding the Dark Brotherhood involves like talking to one person, going to a place, finding a kid, and then like killing someone for him, and then you join. I liked it this one much better, which is like you have to murder somebody. And the first time I played this game, I did it by accident. I accidentally got in a fight with someone and I killed him. And then Lucian LeChance said, "You're a murderer," and off I went into the Dark Brotherhood and became an evil character.
Lord Daedra is the enemy. He is the Prince of Destruction, and the Daedra are his servants. The chapel is cast.
I don't think you should be able to max out every guild. I think it's better if you do multiple playthroughs. I think it keeps it more interesting. So like if Mage's Guild are fighting with Fighters Guild, and you got to pick one, I think that works good. So it just encourages you to replay it with different stuff in mind.
If you mean the priest, I don't think he made it out of the city. Very few of us did.
Commando was Alyssa Milano's last good movie. Good lord.
He's in charge of the city guard.
You know, I like the bubbly girls in Final Fantasy. I think you always got to have like a weird, quirky girl character.
You'll find him at the barricade at the top of the road. He's still trying to hold what's left of the guard together.
How does recruiting every random murderer make sense, though? Skyrim actually has you learn about the Dark Brotherhood and their thought process first. Not really. You just kind of show up. It's really just kind of handed to you. Like, do you want to do the Dark Brotherhood? And you're like, yes. I think it's more fun if it's secret. You know, and Lucian LeChance is like, you've been chosen. You know, it doesn't matter that every random murderer doesn't end up in the Murderers Guild. It matters that you are. And that you can kind of stumble into it on accident by murdering someone and being evil. Like, first you have to be evil, and then you get drawn into it. And you have to cross another line and go kill another dude. Look at that red sky. That is beautiful. Oh, my.
Stand back, civilian. This is no place for you. Get back to the encampment at once.
What happened here?
We lost the damn city. That's what happened. It was too much. Too fast. We were overwhelmed. Couldn't even get everyone out. There are still people trapped in there. Some made it to the chapel, but others were just run down in the straits. The Count and his men are still holed up in the castle.
Let's go save them. Come on.
We can't even get back into the city to help them. That damned Oblivion gate blocking the way. The only thing we can do, we'll try to hold our ground, that's what. If we can't hold this barricade, those beasts could march right down and overrun the encampment. I have to try and protect the few civilians that are left. It's all I can do now.
Weird, quirky girls in real life are annoying. It's not about real life. It's about what they represent in the story. You know?
My home! We couldn't have been any less prepared for this. Seems like they came out of nowhere. There were just so many of them. If only I had a way to strike back at the enemy. But we can't leave the barricade until that Oblivion gate is closed. You want to help? You're kidding, right? If you're serious, maybe
Well, yeah, this isn't really default Oblivion. The faces are modded a little bit. The graphics are a little bit modded, but these aren't like massive mods.
I don't know how to close this, but it must be possible because the enemy closed
The faces aren't that different. There's more advanced face mods that really make them look different. You can try them out on like what is it?
I sent men into the gate to see if they
The
could
Nexus
find a way to
mods.
shut it. They haven't come back. If you can get in there, find out what happened to them. If they're alive, help them finish the job. If not, see what you can do on your own. The best I can say is good luck. If you make it back alive, we'll be waiting for you. You mean the priest? Some kind of... They've opened one right in front of...
All right.
It's a grave.
Let's put on my raiment. Oop. This little imp got me. Let me check my inventory here. It's still, I have enough to like do this. Yeah. Here we go. Off we go, my friends, into the plains of Oblivion. And it's not just a Jeff Loomis record. It is a horrid place of torment. I guess the soldiers got burned alive.
Thank the Nine. I never thought I'd see you with a friendly face. The others... taken. They were taken to the tower.
It's all right. What's going on?
You sent us in to try and close the gate. We were ambushed, trapped, and picked off.
I like the full screen glow effect of Oblivion for sure, though. They had a lot of games at this time that looked like that, and I still think they look great.
Off to the big tower. You've got to save him. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, let's send him back.
Captain is still holding the barricade. I figured I was the last one left alive. All right. I'll try to get out of here. Let the captain know what's going on.
Go for it. I don't remember if you just go into the tower here or... I don't remember if I can go through these gates here. We'll check it out. Something get me? Oh. Okay. There we go. Oh yeah, you could pick the grass here. Blood grass. Oh, I can see a bunch of dead bodies there, though. I think you can, like, hop around and get them. But you have to have, like, really high acrobatics. We'll just skip it. Go this way. Bloodgrass. Figure out what the bloodgrass makes. Story purpose of is to convict a downcast man to embrace adventure and live life to the fullest. Interesting. So it's a virgin fantasy. That's what you're saying. Most women that have to do with foils to like downcast men are virgin fantasies. Like the dominant older woman that decides to sleep with the virgin, and then magically he's like the best sex she's ever had. It's a virgin fantasy. That's what I call virgin fantasy. Talked about it in a video called Chad versus the Virgin. Scamp skin. Scamp skin. Oh, this is fun. These like fleshy pods with like some potions in them. I'm in combat. Get him. Get back my arrows. Zoe Deschanel has become almost inseparably associated with the manic pixie dream girl trope since she has played at so many of them. Has she? I find her really boring and very, very stale. I feel like she never has any personality in any movie. She's just completely like monotone. So portraying her as like upbeat just doesn't make sense to me. She looks like she has a 1,000-yard stare in most of the movies that I see her in. Oh, the hatred of the Chad is just it's the Virgin looking across and visualizing why he thinks he's better than the Chad, not understanding the Chad. He's like, the Chad walks funny, he does all these things I don't understand, girls like him for no reason, I don't, rather than if he just walked up to the Chad and said like, dude, how do you get so many girls to like you? He would just tell him. Like, no, dude, you just, you just talk to them like a human being. Don't put them on a pedestal and think about what kind of jokes they like to hear and tell those jokes. It's like, not rather than be upset that they don't like your jokes. Like, why doesn't this girl magically like the inner me? It's like, well, you gotta try to make other people like you. Oh, wow, let's put out poison. Well, that is lovely. Look at that fart gas. Let's do some repairing. I can't repair items while enemies are nearby. Is the grass an enemy? This like Harada root? I'm not seeing any enemies. But maybe they are. So I think I go in this tower and then you take the bridge over to the middle tower. I think that's what I have to do. Oh, there's an enemy. He didn't see me yet, though. There we go. I think I go into this one. Is that what I do? Thanks. Oh, another scamp. Whoa. I don't know what that thing was that popped up, and I remember that. Maybe there's no door down here. Did I somehow miss the door? Maybe I gotta keep going. Maybe there's no door in this one. Maybe I gotta go to the next one. Let's find out. Why do women claim to be, to love so-called passive nice guys, but don't actually? Maybe women can't help it. It's on a subconscious level. Maybe. Men claim that they like, they like sluts and then they hate them, Or they claim that they hate them and yet they date nothing but them. So there's always like cross lines. Just trust what people do, not what they say, I guess. It's probably the deeper lesson there. And I'm not going to generalize all women, but generally speaking, why don't you like passive guys? Well, they're not masculine. They don't do all of the things that are attractive in a mate. So that's why you don't like them. They say they want a nice guy. What they really mean is they want someone that likes them and treats them with respect, but is also masculine. They want a tamed wild man. They don't want a domesticated man. There's a big difference. Oh, there's a bunch of them here. I'm gonna get wrecked. Ooh. Doesn't help that I'm a vampire right now, does it? Come here, scamp. You're done. Whoa! Something blew up there. There we go. Got him. Dremora field arrows. Now I'm over encumbered with those Dremora field arrows. How much damage do they do? 2 versus 2. But they weigh a pound each. Let's get rid of those. We don't need those. Good lord. Heavy. Yeah, Hardwick says there's an interesting article that Congress won't be extending copyright, which means Mickey Mouse and Superman will be public domain in about a decade. Now, what will be interesting is when they file lawsuits for trademark violation, not copyright violation. People who aren't in the business don't know the difference between these because people just use them interchangeably, but they're very different. Trademark is like the name McDonald's. Copyright would be like your book. Oh, he killed me. Oh, we have to go back to the autosave. I have to do all that again. Yeah, we'd have to do all that again, but I think I'm out of time. That's what I get for not saving the game. So yeah, we're out of time for the stream. Thanks so much for watching. We'll restart the main quest shortly here. I'm gonna create a new save. Apparently I can't save though. Maybe I was jumping. Can't save. All right, so I think I'm going to call it there for now. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I think it'd be more interesting when they say Mickey Mouse is a trademark. The name Mickey Mouse is a trademark. His appearance is trademarked. It's part of our brand. We've been using the mouse ears for 100 years or whatever it is. I think they'll have a really good case against anyone who tries to come out with something called Mickey Mouse, that Mickey Mouse is trademarked. Now, that doesn't mean they can't have a character that looks and sounds like Mickey Mouse. But, they can't have Mickey Mouse ears and stuff like that. Did you hear how Preston from Pocket Jacks Comics owns the trademark on Comics Day? Now, the thing is that nobody is probably going to try to take that to court because no one else actually has a claim on Comicsgate either. But just because you file trademark paperwork doesn't mean you own the trademark, guys. This is another thing. That just means that you filed trademark paperwork. So if you trademark the name McDonald's in some area that McDonald's doesn't exist, McDonald's could take you to court and say, we've been operating under this trademark and it's been established and everybody knows that it's our trademark and therefore this trademark filing is invalid and the judge will overturn it. It's happened bunches of times. People do it with rock bands and stuff. I think it happened with Immortal. You trademark the name Immortal. One band member says, I own this. And then they take it to court and the judge throws it out and says, no, you don't. Okay, so just because you file the paperwork doesn't mean you own the trademark or that it will hold up against a lawsuit. That can easily go against him in a lawsuit. But the thing is, it's bad optionality to try to sue someone over the trademark to Comicsgate. Because what would you do? you know, what are you going to do with the trademark, right? No one owns it. So you can't really make a case that you can make a case you've been using it as a hashtag, but it wouldn't hold up in court. Likewise, if you had already been using it, there's nothing to say that, like, because you filed trademark paperwork that you would automatically get it forever. You know, doesn't make sense. So I think it'd be more interesting. Some dude tried to trademark Insanity a while back. Yeah, it's all about what holds up in court, guys. A lot of times people think paperwork is the end-all be-all. They think they have to file a copyright notice with the Library of Congress, or they think someone else can steal what is copyrighted by filing a copyright, by taking their book and filing it with the Library of Congress. It doesn't work that way. The Library of Congress does not issue copyrights. It never has, it never will. You don't own, like, you do not have a copyright. It's like, am I allowed to put copyright me on it? It's like, yes, that's just a legal notice that's an original work owned by you. So if anybody wants to create a derivative work, they have to go through you to do that. If anybody wants to publish it or reproduce it, they have to go through you to do that. All a copyright notice does is it tells people it's not in the public domain and who owns it. It doesn't, copyright is not something you have to do through the Library of Congress. It's something that if you are anticipating a lawsuit involving copyright, then that's evidence that you have actually produced the work in question before, at a certain point in time whenever you file the paperwork. I do file mine with the Library of Congress periodically. I usually group them up together to save money, and that's how I do it. So that way I don't have to pay like whatever it is, $40 for every little book I come out with. Because that would be, I come out with like 4 books a year or something. So that's, be $160 a year extra cost just to have the Library of Congress hold a Word document for me on a hard drive. Because you do it all electronically now. So it's kind of dumb. You don't have to worry that much about it. But, if you are worried about it at all, the optionality is pretty good. $40 is not that expensive. And it makes sure that if anybody is distributing your book, you have some kind of moral ground, or some kind of legal evidence that's backing up your claim that you can sue them. It's not that necessary, though. NASA has confirmed that it's working with Tom Cruise to film the first movie shot in space. Interesting. All right. Chris Fine says, glad I caught you tonight. Thanks for joining me. Thanks so much for watching. The newest book is called Keys to Prolific Creativity. Next audiobook chapter will come out on the channel on Friday if you want to listen for free. The audiobook for Eyes in the Walls has been completed on the channel, and you can find that. If you want to find the audiobook for Keys, you can find it right there. Let me very quickly for you guys find the playlist if you want to listen to the Eyes in the Walls audiobook for some reason. Well, not for some reason, because it's good, and you want to hear that ending that everybody thinks is crazy, then I'll go ahead and link it here for you guys, and then we'll say goodnight. Where is it?
Fridays.
Let me see. Where is the share button?
Good grammar and...
Only wants to share the first video. It used to be much easier to share playlists. Maybe let me do it in my studio here. They make changes to YouTube to make everything like more annoying. They don't like playlists because they want to present you something that is more in line with what their algorithm thinks you actually want, rather than the playlist which you want. They've been de-emphasizing playlists for a while now. But there you go. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Pocket Jacks owns the Comicsgate Comics trademark, not the Comicsgate Show trademark. It doesn't matter that much. It would be an interesting legal fight. I don't think anybody has the balls or really the time and money and energy to try to sue over something that dumb. I certainly wouldn't litigate over it, and I don't know too many other people that would, but there's lawyers that are willing to take money. I mean, if you're paying up front for it and I'm not having to try to get a percentage of damages captured, I might litigate it if I were an attorney, but because you're usually trying to get a percentage of damages, good luck finding an attorney to sue over something that dumb. They'd probably be like, it's a really flimsy case and it's not worth my time. So thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you all next time.